Hey, this is Tom Nash, and yesterday, the 8-minute speech by Jerome Powell out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, cost the world's richest people $80 billion. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Sergey Brin, Warren Buffett, just a few names, lost $80 billion at 8 minutes. That's $10 billion per minute by my math. Now, the reason I'm giving you this number is because I think something sinister is about to happen, and it's not good news for me, for you, and the entire market. So first of all, let's talk about it. Jerome Powell wants to be Paul Volcker, but at this point, he's much closer to the Joker, because everything we've seen from this man last year is an absolute joke.
We're not thinking about raising rates. We're not even thinking about raising rates.
Now, you know how in basketball somebody has a bad shooting day, a bad year? I mean, Jerome Powell is having a bad career. And this is no laughing matter because his legacy at this point is what he's absolutely terrified about. So he came out yesterday and he said, look, inflation is still very high, 40-year high. This is my priority. He's trying to damage control this whole transitory debacle kerfuffle he had last year. And so far, he's not doing a bad job at it. And honestly, he's not wrong because what he's saying is absolutely true. The inflation levels are still insanely high. It's still at 40-year highs. Yes, we had a little bit of an improvement, but we're still above 8%, which is 4 times more than the benchmark. Same thing happens in Canada. Same thing happens in Germany. Same thing happens in Spain. And that's just the beginning. A lot of countries are faced with a very similar problem. It's a global problem that needs to be solved. And Jerome Powell, being the Fed chair of the big banana in the room, has to set the policy right. So he came out there, he said, hey, I'm still hawkish. I'm going to be the responsible adult in the room. I'm going to make the tough, unpopular decisions because this is what we need. Maybe not what we want, but this is the medicine.
The Federal Open Market Committee's overarching focus right now is to bring inflation back down to our 2% goal. Restoring price stability will take some time and requires using our tools forcefully to bring demand and supply into better balance. While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses.
And you know what? I absolutely respect what he said, and I admire his goal. But the real question here is, will he be allowed to do what he actually wants to do? Or will some powerful people with a lot of money and clout start to mess with his plan? Because I just mentioned in the opener, we have some pissed off people with money, with clout that want him to do something irresponsible so they can actually benefit from it in the short term. So what I'm talking about here is very simple. On the one hand, we have the Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be insulated. It's supposed to be 100% independent in its decision making. Because we know one thing, political financial decision making is suboptimal. We want the Fed to have its own role to do whatever it thinks professionally needs to be done without any political influences. Of course, this is at least in theory. Obviously, between that and reality, there's a huge gap. We have people with money who can interfere through lobbying, through networking. We have politicians who are looking for clout who can interfere. There's a lot of influences that can trickle into this system and actually impact the decision-making of the Fed. Now, one example was in the opener of this video. I told you, all these rich people are losing money because of what Powell is doing. And Powell's basically just saying, well, I'm just warming up. Now, if they see that this continues, they're going to try to pull the lever and ease up a little bit. But even more alarming, because the billionaires, as much as they're annoying, they kind of understand how important what Powell is trying to do here. So they're not going to do anything absolutely moronic. Politicians is a whole different story because on the other side of this equation, there's a bunch of idiot politicians and they're standing there trying to figure out how they can get the quickest, shortest, absolutely insanest clout out of this, and they don't give a shit or they don't understand what the actual implications of what they're doing will be. That is just literally how most politicians operate. They're either too stupid or too evil to actually not do the wrong thing. So for example, on June, we had Elizabeth Warren actually go at Powell saying, well, you're about to drive the economy off the cliff. At least if you don't do nothing, we have inflation and a high job market and not a recession.
I just want to say, you know what's worse than high inflation and low unemployment? It's high inflation and a recession with millions of people out of work. And I hope you'll reconsider that before you drive this economy off a cliff.
Now, obviously, that's a stupid statement because you cannot have high inflation, a high job market, and no recession long term. It's obviously lagging indicators, but I don't know if she doesn't understand that or she understands it and she's still trying to get some political clout out of this. But she is just one example of many, many voices that are now starting to creep out into the decision-making process of the Fed. Because look, even in the normal year, this pressure exists because politicians like to be popular. They like to be populist. That's kind of their thing. But even more so in the midterm elections year, which are coming up very, very, very shortly. It's not a good time to be fiscally responsible and the adult in the room when voices are actually telling them, hey, we're going to lose the midterms and there's going to be a complete kerfuffle around this thing if you don't ease up. So if you are the Fed chair and you are independent, but you have people with obscene amounts of money basically telling you, hey, you slow down, you're killing us. On the other hand, you have politicians who are basically telling you, hey, you're going to drive the economy off the cliff, and they all pressuring you to ease up. And then I hear the sentence yesterday saying, hey, after September, we might ease up. I start to think whether the Fed can withstand this avalanche of bullshit and actually do what needs to be done. We've already seen the government just a few days ago absolutely take a shit on the policy of the Fed by giving up and giving away $300 billion in student loans. So they just threw $300 billion that people do not have to repay as debt, which will go to spending for the most part, actually making inflation worse just to get some votes in November. I mean, how far will they go with this policy to buy votes in November in the midterms? These are politicians. So for me, I can see anywhere where they basically say, well, this is too far. And the craziest part about this whole story is what I think is happening here. Because I think Jerome Powell and his team knew how bad inflation was. And they kept calling it transitory for a long time while the entire world around them was taking on fire because of political reasons. I think Jerome Powell was concerned about his reappointment long term, and he was basically keeping this transitory bullshit alive from political pressures. Now, we're on the opposite side. Now, he completely changed his tune, and there's new pressures coming up about slowing down the quantitative tightening. Now, we already have a bad record for Mr. Powell and his team by them caving and absolutely giving up and calling this shit transitory for a whole year when everybody with half a brain knew it's complete bullshit. Now, for somebody who already failed to withstand the political pressure, assuming obviously he's not an idiot. So I'm going to assume here that Jerome Powell knew that this wasn't transitory because, I mean, otherwise that's a whole different enchilada. But assuming he knew this wasn't transitory, he already failed to withstand political pressure once. Now it's going to be even worse. Midterms are critical. Without the midterms, pretty much you're a lame duck. So the pressure is going to be insane after September, both from the billionaires and the politicians. Can this man withstand and not slow down? Because let me tell you one thing. If he buckles under the pressure, yes, we'll probably have a sweet rally until the end of the year. But then inflation will be back, and it will be back with a vengeance. And it's going to be a runaway train, which no amount of interest rate spikes will be able to stop. We're going to see an absolute avalanche of a shitstorm in our economy and the stock market. So yes, it's going to be like drinking a few beers. In the beginning, you're having fun, everything is great, but then you're vomiting on the floor. So I hope this doesn't happen, but I'm very concerned with what I heard about the innuendo about what happens after September. I'm very concerned when I hear people like Elizabeth Warren, who actually has a big voice right now, and I'm concerned by seeing billionaires lose so much money in such a short time frame. Now, can you blame me? Do you disagree with me? Do you see another scenario? Comment below. Would love to hear your opinion. See you tomorrow.